All right. Welcome to Connect with Everyone. Let's get into it. So, um, content can make us feel connected, right? Um, we can read content. It can make us feel closer to an artist that we like. It can make us feel closer to other people, our friends. It can even make us sometimes feel closer to a product that we like, or a movie, a piece of artwork. The flip side to that is content can also create distance. I think most of us have seen and witnessed the growth of misinformation and conspiracy theories in this past year. And sort of wielding content irresponsibly can cause harm and even sometimes lead to people's death when you treat content irresponsibly. As digital producers and technologists, the struggle is really real, and we have a responsibility to use our talent and our ability to create content that brings people together. Our work should include and never exclude anyone who would want to take part in whatever it is that we're making. And I think the way that we are currently handling content is not the best way. And certainly the way in which we think about content is not the best way. Content that is unstructured and locked into these inflexible containers is difficult to manage. Sort of thinking about content as only text when we all know that content can be images, it can be memes, it can be video, it can be audio, it can be GIFs or GIFs, whichever side of that argument you fall into. I personally say GIFs. Thinking of digital content as mostly a collection of pages on a website. This is the lovely state of North Carolina in the United States government website. Say what you will about it. Well, that's not true, obviously. Content mostly ends up nowadays on social media feeds, right? And Google previews. Or thinking about content or handling content, in a way such that it doesn't have, an expiration date, and it's not something that you need to maintain. Or even worse, not treating the content as an active part of the subject or the product or the brand or the service that you are making. Your content is a living, breathing part of whatever it is you're making, and it should always be thought of as so. And it should be treated as not something that you just put into this nicely designed box. In other words, you should never treat your content as an afterthought. And what is the real implication of that? The real implication of that is treating your content as an afterthought can actually harm others. And this is true because a lot of times when your content is an afterthought, is usually built in pre-existing systems, and those pre-existing systems oftentimes have bias built within them and are built within biased knowledge bases. So I think we need to work to manage some of these potential risks and other potential risks of our content going wrong. And some of those risks include audience alienation, and other long-term risks include, leaving our environment in a bad place. We want to make sure that as we're going along and producing these things and creating more and more digital content, that we are leaving our environment better than we found it, right? As a result, I really think we need to reshift the way we think about how we create and organize and share our content with our audiences, while also having sort of this freedom to make adjustments and make additions as we go along. In other words, we really have to stop and sort of check ourselves before we wreck ourselves. And we're at a pivotal time, and we can do that. We have the chance to really stop and think about our way forward. Modern organizations are dynamic, and there is information coming in and out. Team members, we're all a part of organizations. We all take on many roles. We take on many roles to complete projects, to meet goals. There's a lot of chaos there. And when you don't have a moldable framework that can grow with you, grow with your position, grow with your organization, and grow with your content, anything can happen. You can misplace content. You end up duplicating effort. Things end up not being as efficient. However, when you create a framework that you can operate from, things end up improving and being a lot more efficient. However, creating a framework can be daunting, but it also gives you an opportunity to rethink your current approaches and produce more empathetic, sustainable, and available work. So how do we do this? How can we make something like that work? I propose that we adopt the structured content approach. Well, what is that? The structured content approach creates a space for us to put our content first. It can help us maximize our efforts. It can help us connect with people and almost everyone in our audience. Structured content it's content that is planned and it's developed outside of the presentation. And so that seems like a lot of jargon. So let's really sort of unpack what that really means. What does it mean? It means that you take your content and you organize it into small, meaningful pieces so that it can go anywhere, it can reach anyone, and it can look any way you want it to look after it reaches its destination. It is essentially treating your content as data, and it makes a single source of truth for all of your content. So to create structured content, you start with designing a content model. The content model is meant to be sort of an ecosystem of your content. And again, as we discussed, your content is not just text. It's all of the content related to your subject, your product, your brand, whatever content you're using to make a digital representation of whatever it is you're making. So you start with content types. And this is where you really start to organize your content and think about the relationships that you have between these content types by using common attributes. So all of your content types will have attributes. And when you have a lot of content that has been previously unstructured, it can be difficult to figure out what those relationships might be. However, when you start to think about the people who might be using this content and why they'll be using it, it can really help you bring the structure of your model into scope and see the map quite clearly. And also, one of the great things about the structured content approach is that you can really stop duplicating efforts and focus on what matters, which is building authentic connections with people and sort of, focus on the things that matter. So what does this look like in practice? Well, when I think about a dynamic modern organization that is complex with a global audience, I think about the WuTang Clan. So you can meet the WuTang Clan. When I first heard their song CREAM, which is an acronym, it stands for Cash Rules Everything Around Me, I was 15. And it really impacted me because at the time, I was listening to all sorts of music, but I was also reading a lot. And I was reading a lot about sociology. I was reading a lot about philosophy. I was learning about different systems. I was learning about humans, how humans interact with each other, how humans interact with systems. My parents were super into the Black Power movement, so we were talking a lot about capitalism and the financial system and how the financial systems impact humans. And so to read about that and hear this perspective of cash rules everything around me and talking about sort of this capitalism from that perspective really hooked me in. And so from that point on, I sort of just consumed everything that Wu-Tang had to offer, and I became a lifelong fan. It wasn't until I became a developer and a content creator that I realized that WuTang Clan had a vast ecosystem of content. And if you see here in the Wu-Tang content link, so they have 9 core members. You have Jizza, RZA, Master Killer, Inspector Deck, You God, Capadonna, Ghostface Killer, Raekwon, Method Man, and R.I.P. Old Dirty Bastard. So those are the 9 core members of Wu-Tang Clan. However, these 9 core members have many roles, and they share many roles within the context of their organization. Those are also the names that I just previewed. They're aliases. Those are not their actual names. And together, they have made hundreds of studio albums. They also combine together to make several solo groups and combine with other people to make side projects. But in addition to their musical output, they have a wide range of other artistic ventures. There's films, there's TV shows, there's visual art, there's print media. In addition to that, they have Wu-Tang as the brand. So there is a whole e-commerce nature around Wu-Tang. There's all their merchandise. So all of the Wu-Tang, T-shirts, socks, flags, if you will. You name it, there is a Wu-Tang product for it. They also have events. They have concerts. They sell tickets for lots of things. And in addition to that, they have a very loyal global fan base that stretches across just about every demographic you can think of. So in practice, let's say that we were tasked with creating a Wu-Tang museum or archive. For short, we'll just call it the Wuseum. Where should we start? What should be our focus? How do we make sure that all Wu-Tang fans are able to access accurate information about the Wuseum? The answer is we should start with the content and create a model with reoccurring content types so that the same attributes not only connect all the Wu-Tang data, but allow us to send and present data on any presentation surface. So looking at this sort of very small cross-section of what a potential museum content model we would build, we would maybe start off with, okay, we know that we need a person content type. And that would maybe be, so we're thinking, okay, first we're going to start with the 9 core members. So we'd have a person content type. We need their name, their alias, and then we'd move on to their creative work. And we'd know every creative work needs a title, when it was made, the media type. And then we would get to, well, who participated in making this creative work? And this is when you start thinking about the relationship between your content types. So participants, those would be your person content types. So you would make a reference between the creative work and person. So that's where you want to start thinking about how your content types relate to each other based on the attributes. Another example not pictured here was maybe you would want to have an event content type where you would list and make sure all events have the same attributes, such as a time, a location, a cost, and maybe an image with alt text for the event. And I think the important sort of takeaway from that is, as content modelers, we are in charge of creating a digital representation of whatever it is we're making. We have a real responsibility to consider the potential bias within our model. For example, let's take a couple seconds and think about the typical WuTang fan. What image comes to your mind? Who is the typical WuTang fan? The image you hold in your mind is only a fraction of their fan base. So if we were to build this model based solely on the image of our mind, or perhaps have built this model based on only what we, on pre-existing systems, we run the risk of leaving out a whole run-of-the-mill of a whole wide gamut of humans who love WuTang. And that's not what we want to do, because, again, they have a loyal global fan base, and everyone who loves WuTang deserves to visit and get information about the museum. So WuTang, as an organization represented digitally, I think, is a great example of that. But really, this can be any modern organization, and it should accommodate a wide range of human differences and experiences. That's what this boils down to. And the structured content approach allows for inclusive, empathetic structures, universal clarity, accessibility, and a focus on sustainability. So, inclusive and empathetic content modeling allows you, when you are able to build your own content model, you can consider people in groups that typically haven't had easy access to existing products. A content model for the WuTang Museum or the Wuseum should people who use digital products come from a wide range of backgrounds, right? And have diverse life experiences. These experiences impact the way that they interact the world. That means that the way that they impact the world, including the ways that they interact with websites and applications and any other, presentation interface that they interact with. So that should be included in our thinking. We should always be thinking that first when we're building our products. And with that in mind, let's look at some practical ways in which we can do that. So, universal clarity. Some of those include validation rules. When you build your own content model, you can create reminders and content requirements that encourage consistency. So in your content model, let's say, you're publishing articles related to things that WuTang are up to. Let's say you're making a blog post or you're writing a review of a recent WuTang concert. You can require that there's a summary. This is super great for things like screen readers, so that when a screen reader is reading the page, a person will know right away what this article is about. However, what is great for accessibility is great for everyone. Most people navigate the web and applications and kiosks and all sorts of, digital devices by scanning. No one actually reads the whole thing. They look for keywords and key bits of information to tell them if this is something relevant to their needs. So having something like a summary is great for everyone. So accessibility, structured content can help make accessibility a part of the model from the start. So this is, again, a great gem of structured content. Within structured content and building out your own content model, you can build good choices within your content model. People want to do the right thing, and you can help people make good choices. People want to make good choices. People actually do want to help people participate, believe it or not. So when you build in your model and require that, let's say this is the person profile of the members of WuTang, and you upload here the profile for RZA of WuTang, and you require alt text. You say, yes, you must have alt text here when you add in an image. Well, in addition to that, it's required, but you also add in a little bit of behavior. This is important. Why is it important? It's important for SEO, but it's also important for accessibility. So you're also adding in a bit of reinforcement to continue on. So maybe the next time that this person encounters or has to upload an image, even if it's not required, they will still add in the alt text. You can also build in things like color contrasting helpers within a flexible, customizable content model. This is a group image of WuTang Clan, and what is built into this metadata is giving you information on the color palette of this image and what colors are best suited for text that can go in the foreground and the background of this image. So this is another great thing about the structured content model approach, is that you can build accessibility helpers straight into your model. So let's get into sustainability. Again, with the idea of content as data, it allows for this single source of truth of your content, as we were discussing earlier. And anytime you have all of your data in one place and there's a single source of truth and you have less duplication, that is always going to be a much more sustainable process. You cut down on the use of resources, and channels that you use is going to be a much more sustainable process. But specifically, when we look at this sort of omni-channel experience that we find ourselves in, when you have content as data, you can sort of create and connect to all sorts of APIs and web services with your content as data. So if, for instance, you had that event content type we talked about, you could take that same event content type and have a presentation of your events on a website, on an app, on a kiosk, on a billboard, but also send that same event content data to a printer to have event posters or tour posters printed up. So that is one of the really great things about structured content. It really does allow your data to be portable and go anywhere. And similar to that is this idea of interoperability. So you can exchange information and share information between systems. And similar to sort of this omni-channel experience is sharing information, right? So this is the cover of a WuTang comic book. Yes, WuTang has comic books, in case you didn't know. They're pretty great. I encourage you to check them out if you didn't know. But let's say that the museum wanted to reissue some of their comic books. Well, if this information was in the archive, they could just resubmit all of this data to the printer and reissue these comic books with ease. So again, it just re-illustrates there's less duplication and much more efficiency when you choose to use a structured content approach. And again, I keep saying it, I'm actually duplicating myself. You can stop the duplication of effort with the structured content approach, and that will always be a much more sustainable process. You don't need to recreate your content every time there's a design change or a platform change. The content that you produce for your application, for your website, for your kiosk, for your print can also be the same data that is moved into Twitter, for any other social media platform. And with that, you improve accuracy. There's no cutting and pasting, and so that removes the cutting and pasting error. All of that data can feed straight into your Twitter card. It can feed straight into your Facebook. It can feed, straight into your Google search previews. So you are, stopping those sort of pain points of inaccuracy. So some of the last things I want to talk about is, I'm going to leave you with some parting words of RZA, who he said, you must think before you grow. And I think that is a super important thing. It's simple, but the idea behind that is really going slow. And I think that the structured content approach really allows you to do that. It forces you to sort of sit down and really think about your content, to put it first, but also to think about the people that are going to be using the content, think about the people that you work with, and make sure that you are creating space for everyone who is going to engage with whatever it is that you're making, and make sure that you include them. That's it for me. Thank you so much.